on earth are we? Why in heaven are we here? And how to make sense of this mess of our humanness and perhaps even transcend it. Welcome, everyone, to Season 2 of Dawn of an Era of Well-Being, where we deep dive into uplift with insight, thanks to remarkably informed guests exploring the nature of our human nature and how to better engage it. If abnormal is the new normal and perceiving is the new believing, then inner is the new outer, and consciousness is our new source of healing. Yet for many, it feels like anything but the dawn of an era of well-being. From pandemia to war to economic, environmental, and even democratic breakdown and more, as space exploration advances at breakneck pace, all share center stage in this overheated emotional climate that our species struggles to navigate. So what's going on? Well, if you look at it from the outside in, it's the same old conflictual story, getting rather scary. But now we're raising the bar by raising awareness that this mess of our humanness can only be resolved from the inside out, as in vision emanating from a profound shift in perception about the world around us and within us. This is the thrust of Dawn of an Era of Well-Being podcast and book. I'm Alison Goldwyn, and we're in a mighty discussion space featuring mighty voices of loving change, two of whom are our esteemed co-hosts, Ervin Laszlo, a two-time Nobel Peace Prize nominee, world-renowned philosopher and systems scientist, author or co-author of over 106 books, founder of the Laszlo Institute of New Paradigm Research and the Club of Budapest, and recipient of multiple honors and awards like the Goya Peace Prize, the Assisi Mandirov Peace Prize, and the Luxembourg Peace Prize. And Fred Tsao, business leader, author, futurist, practitioner of Eastern wisdom and Western science, chairman of the Family Business Network's Ambassador Circle, and founder of ITEA Institute and Octave Institute, fusing ancient wisdom and quantum science as a platform for people to achieve a purposeful life, mindfully lived at new levels of consciousness. Today's exceptional guest is Dr. Deepak Chopra, founder of the Chopra Foundation, a nonprofit entity for research on well-being and humanitarianism, as well as Chopra Global, a modern-day health company at the intersection of science and spirituality. He's a world-renowned pioneer in integrative medicine and personal transformation, and a clinical professor of family medicine and public health at the University of California, San Diego. Deepak serves as a senior scientist with Gallup Organization and is the author of over 89 books translated into over 43 languages, including numerous New York Times bestsellers. His 90th book, a national bestseller, Metahuman, Unleashing Your Infinite Potential, unlocks the secrets to moving beyond our present limitations to access a field of infinite possibilities. Time magazine describes Dr. Chopra as one of the top 100 heroes and icons of the century. Quite the legacy. So I want to welcome this metahuman to our conversation about well-being because, frankly, Deepak, I never met a human I didn't like. Now, this conversation is going to go over to Ervin, but before I do that, and then we're going to swing over to Fred, I want to read a brief excerpt from your fascinating chapter of Dawn of an Era Well-Being book, because of its relevance to the current competitive notions of Western success, excess, if you will, versus Eastern wisdom traditions, and if this alchemy of both is ultimately the solution. So here is the book quote from, I believe, page 110. Deepak writes, "Morality and spirituality add meaning to human existence, and the one thing human beings cannot tolerate for long isn't poverty, but a meaningless life. If we cut to the quick, all models for achieving well-being are fatally flawed by using the reducing valve. When infinite possibilities are squeezed down into a few possibilities advocated for our own good, the price is too high. Instinctively, children rebel when a parent says it's for your own good. And the same is true when we are faced with formulas for well-being. Traditional cultures have their good points, no doubt. But this doesn't explain why the Japanese, Chinese, and Indians flee in vast numbers away from their traditions into the arms of westernized living." So on that fascinating note, over to you, Ervin. Take it away.
Alison, thank you. And Deepak, welcome to this podcast. We go back, I don't know how many years, but I have never treasured a friendship more than it is with you. I consider you one of the wisest people on earth. I want to ask this wisest person on earth a very fundamental question. I have a sense, it's an intuitive sense, and I want to ask if you share this or not. This sense is that somehow we have bottomed out, that somehow that what we are facing is now, and among the alternatives, a positive phrase, a positive way forward. That what is beginning to happen is that the human spirit is beginning to awaken. As I try to facilitate a movement toward what I call the upshift, shifting toward an evolutionary higher level of sustainability and thriving, as I talk about that, I feel a resonance. Somehow more and more people join. I have more and more people saying, yes, this is something we want to get involved with, and something that we feel too. Somehow we are on the cusp. And what is forward, what is ahead of us, is a next leap in evolution. Perhaps too optimistic, too thought out. I don't think so. Deep down, I think that we have got now to the dawn of a new age, as this podcast series calls it. We are someplace where we can open the way forward like never before. This is just to add this one thought. Never before in the history of humanity and the planet have a conscious humanity faced an alternative like the present, an alternative of choosing its destiny, choosing it consciously. This is the first time this opportunity arises. And somehow I feel that we are meeting it. I'm not usually that optimistic, but I somehow feel that we are on the right path. We are moving forward. Deepak, what is your intuitive sense as well as scientific rational sense? Where are we in this historic turning point? Which way are we going forward?
So thank you for having me in this podcast, Ervin. I treasure our friendship, also my friendship with Fred Tsao, whom I've known intermittently for many years. And thank you, Alison, for also introducing me and inviting me to this conversation. So, Ervin, when people ask, are you hopeful? My answer is hope is a sign of despair. We don't need hope unless there is despair. So we have to be independent of both hope and despair. Same thing for optimism. There is a pessimistic way to look at what it is, and we should go through it in an optimistic way. But I would like to get away from these ideas of pessimism and optimism to what is reality. And if we embrace reality as we are beginning to evolve to that understanding of reality, then we don't need optimism. We don't need hope. What we need is what our essential nature is, which is creativity. And creativity, of course, also includes imagination. And even that is not enough. We need creativity, and we need imagination, and we need an emergence through an ecosystem or matrix of what you might call love. Love not as a mere sentiment or emotion, but as the ultimate truth at the heart of creation, which is subject and object of experience are one. Seer and scenery are one. Lover and beloved are one. Knower and known are one. Now, we've heard this many times. Sometimes very profound truths become cliches, and then people forget how profound they are. So we've heard, reality is one. We've heard reality is infinite and formless. We've heard that whatever we call reality modifies itself into both perceptual activity, which we call the physical world, and the physical body, which is a human construct, because there's no such thing as a physical world. It's a human interpretation for human perceptual activity that we call matter. Nobody has ever prove the existence of a substance called matter. And, if you look at whatever we call matter, ultimately disappears into formless, infinite non-matter. The essential stuff of the universe is actually non-stuff. And it seems to be intelligent non-stuff. So there's an organizing principle, there's an evolutionary principle, the formless reality that is differentiating into species-specific observers, species-specific modes of observation, and species-specific things observed is infinite and incomprehensible. Even to use words like inside or outside, these are very convenient fictions because in this formless reality, there's nothing inside or outside. It is modifying itself as this experience that we're having right now. And as we shift our identity to this formless reality, we do realize that ultimate reality is a field of infinite possibilities. It is unpredictable because it is creative. It is the source of attention and intention. It's self-organizing. It's self-regulating. And the only thing that we can do wrong is to interfere with it. So the whole idea that I am doing something, that I have causal agency, is what is causing problems. The subject-object split, the naive realism that says that we are physical objects in a physical universe, and that the world exists as perceived by humans, even if humans are not there, is actually a very ridiculous idea. So science itself is demolishing its own precepts. Right now, science is based on subject-object split. It's based on the assumption that there is something called matter. And it's also based on the assumption that atoms and molecules and force fields somehow create the experience that we call consciousness, insight, intuition, imagination, creativity. Transcendence is the dance of molecules. Nothing could be more ridiculous. So I just want to conclude my answer by saying we are at a crossroads. We continue the road we've traveled for the last 40,000 years since the cognitive revolution. Tribal minds, modern capacities, nuclear weapons, climate change, mass migration, social injustice, economic injustice, eco-destruction, and weapons of mass destruction and mechanized death, then we are sleepwalking to extinction. And that's a possibility. We are at that crossroads. The other possibility is to embrace what you're saying, is to understand that all we need for this emergence is shared vision, emotional and spiritual connection with each other and caring for each other, and then complementing the genius that we have in the modern world with all the understanding. But science itself has to take that quantum leap beyond naive realism and understand that what we call the physical universe is our collective manifestation, collective dreamscape. And what we call our body minds are, at the moment, fictional characters in this collective dreamscape. If we transcend these modes of thinking that we've had since primitive times with these modern capacities, then I see what you have as a vision, a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, and joyful world. But this is a moment of choice for collective humanity. You cannot depend on special interest groups, nor can you depend on leaders, world leaders. Most of them are gangsters and murderers. And you can't even depend right now on industry, the industrial complex. So you need a grassroots movement of shift. And that quantum leap has to be what you are suggesting right now. I'm sorry for a very long answer, but that's a summary of where I think we are.
Deepak, we think exactly alike. My biggest project right now, the one into which I put all my energy, in inspiration, whatever insight I had, is called the Upshift Movement, where people can join to facilitate that direction, which is in an evolutionary sense, which brings us to a higher level of integration with freedom, with consciousness. This is not an indifferent universe. This is what I'm saying. It doesn't go by itself completely. There are elements in it which move it in one direction or another. My question, my intuition, at the same time, as I want to share with you, that somehow compared to what it was 6 months ago, a year ago, or many years, or several years ago, there is a positive element, a positive motivation, something emerging, which is not entirely indifferent, not casual. It is emerging because it's part of the universe. It's an evolutionary imperative. It's you either join together and create a whole system which has its integrity, has its unity in its diversity, and is capable of cooperation, or that system and its environment are going to break apart. That's why we need that new thinking, that new vision that you're both talking about. Everything you say about the new sciences is exactly what I've been thinking about, the writing about. It's perfect. But I want to add, I have this sense, not a predetermined sense, but a sense of possibility, enhanced probability, let's say, a possibility which is not neutral, that we are moving forward in, and all of a sudden now, all of a sudden, I mean in the last few months perhaps already, moving in a direction which promises, which tells us that yes, the future is much more opening up for us, a positive, constructive future than we have thought. That we are part of a goal-directed evolutionary system, and we are beginning to realize it and joining it. And that joining means exercising what you and I and many people around us call love. We can become loving beings, and that way, by feeling the love imperative, the love impetus in the world, we can be agents of a better world coming to us. I have that sense. It's not a usual optimism. It's a sense of optimism. It's a sense of possibility. I'm a possibilist, a potentialist, if you say. We have the potential to move forward. We need to facilitate it. And you and I and people around us on this podcast series, we are committed to facilitate that positive evolutionary option, which is the greatest promise, the greatest light at the end of the tunnel that we find now in this day and age.
In a sense, we're acting like midwives, and I'd like to hear a midwife response from Fred about this dynamic of helping to facilitate, to birth what Ervin and Deepak have been talking about. Your thoughts?
Yes. We are the midwife of the field. We do participate in the creation. With our belief and thoughts, we create always our future. If you look at history, our future is always in our head. And we are the representative, otherwise called doing God's work, or we are the agent of the universe. Now, we've already predicted a long time ago that this era is going to come, the second exile era. We don't know exactly when, but we know that in many of the traditions, it says 2,500 years after Buddha is gone, this is going to come, major awakening. In fact, Buddha even wrote a Dharma Sutra for this people 2,500 years to study. It was predicted. Why? If you think about energy as just clustering together to give a perception of form, because we have receptors, and so we perceive it as a form. As Deepak said earlier, it is just perceptions. It doesn't exist. So the clustering of energy to give the perception of matter and form. And so as we move, we actually participate. If you think about energy, it's always rotating like yin and yang. And therefore we see history keep repeating itself. Everything is duality of moving yin and yang because it's energy. And if you don't have intervention to the energy, you can actually predict the energy where it's going. Unless, of course, human being awakens and participate more and more in shifting the energy, and therefore you have a little bit of impact. But we think that we have a lot of impact Sorry, we're just an agent. And so this awakening is well protected. The Mayan calendar predicted. The energy of Earth is increasing. The speed is increasing. So here on Earth, we observe the same thing. Our energy is not separable from the universe energy. And that's why there's astrology, right? And so, yes, I totally agree. We are agent. We participate somewhat. And to the Chinese is, hey, we have to live in accordance to the Tao. Why? We don't create anything. The evolution energy is creating it through us. So we think that we're doing anything. We are wrong. We don't. We are just the vehicle, the agent. We're just like a handphone. It looks like there's a lot of information in a handphone, but actually without Wi-Fi and we have nothing on the cloud, you have nothing on the handphone. It's like watching the TV. It's not the TV, it's a broadcasting station. But we thought the TV is it. You see, I press the button, something comes out. It was nothing to do with the TV. We're just a vehicle for the broadcasting station. And everything is changing. Why? Because it's always oscillating. In the dualistic world, it appears this way. But as Deepak said quietly, knowing and not knowing, existent, non-existent. The duality does not exist in the holistic world of no substance. So the whole key thing is changing the way we perceive, and every action of ours will be different. Thank you.
Beautiful. I want to ask you something, Deepak, because this is all related. You know how when somebody is drowning, they're flailing in the water, and in a sense, this is sort of what the dynamic is on Earth right now in this global identity crisis, or all the convulsions that we're going through as we're birthing whatever is coming next. So actually, I'm going to give a different metaphor of a dance class, because it's almost like this world is doing 10 million different dances. One part of the world is doing a ballet, another is doing jazz, another is doing rap, another is doing cha-cha. Each individual rhythm is wonderful in and of itself, but we're not coordinated. So we're afraid, I think, of allowing to be led, and we're all trying to be the partner that's leading when it comes to energy. That's just my perception. So I want to ask you, because I know that you made a quote that everything is merely a perception, individual exploration of one's conscious, purpose-driven footpath. Yet, with so much human diversity and so much fear right now operative in the world, how to, first of all, interpret well-being and reach an agreed upon meaning for person and planet in order to breathe easier and birth this dawn of an era of well-being collectively. Is this kind of chaotic energy just going to happen in spite of us and mayhem evolves? Or is there a way to do this with a modicum of grace?
The short answer to your question is the only definition of well-being is self-realization, not self-improvement, but self-realization. And a critical mass of that self-realization, which Ervin and Fred both refer to as the awakening. So awakening is getting rid or going beyond the divided mind. Now, in order to do that, we have to also understand a few very basic principles. And those principles are that, number one, differentiation is not separation. So, when a human baby is conceived, you have 25,000 genes, and they kind of, for lack of a better word, let's call that 25,000 packet of genes, a fertilized ovum, which is pluripotential. It has many possibilities. And it divides about 50 times to create the 30, 40, 50 trillion cells that make a human baby. All it needs is 50 replications. 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, etc. And in the end, you have a human body mind, which has more cells than all the stars in the Milky Way galaxy. Now, when you look at this baby, or you look at any biological organism, you say, oh, that's the eyes, that's the nose, that's the liver, that's the brain, those are hair follicles, that's genitalia. And we now think these are separate items in a human body. But in fact, they're differentiated activities of that wholeness, that self-organizing principle that's inherent in the formless, infinite, irreducible, mysterious, incomprehensible, unimaginable reality that we can call whatever we want, the unified field, God, Allah, Ein Sof, Brahman. It doesn't matter. Those are words. But whatever that infinite mystery is, it is intellectually, scientifically, philosophically incomprehensible. To pretend even that we can scientifically understand that mystery is huge arrogance. We are now told by science that there are 2 trillion galaxies, that there are 700 sextillion stars, there might be uncountable trillions of planets, maybe 60 billion habitable planets in just the Milky Way galaxy. And so in this entire scheme of things, planet Earth is not even a speck of or a grain of sand in all the beaches of the universe. And on that grain of sand is a species called Homo sapiens, self-described as the wise ones, is going to save the universe. It's the height of hubris and arrogance. So when we begin to understand 2-3 principles, only 2-3 principles really. One is diversity and differentiation is actually manifestation. So maximum diversity, shared vision, which I mentioned earlier, emotional and spiritual bonding, complementing each other's strengths with that shared vision and that emotional and spiritual connection that we call love, but with maximum diversity. When I say maximum diversity, it means diversity of people in the field of entertainment, songwriters, poets, movie makers, entertainers, people from the educational field, from academia, the grassroots, maximum diversity of gender, LGBT, all the marginalized communities, maximum diversity of race. When you bring maximum diversity, which is the nature of the infinite to differentiate into maximum diversity, you also bring maximum creativity. So creativity, love, diversity, shared vision, emotional bonding. Those are the ingredients for the movement that Fred and Ervin are predicting, and that has been said before. We're not saying it for the first time. We're recycling some of the greatest luminaries that have existed, whether it's the Buddha or Rumi or Jesus. It doesn't matter. Some of the greatest luminaries have said this in the past. But now we have technology. We're sitting, I'm in New York, Fred is in Singapore, and Ervin is in Europe, and we're having a conversation, and we're reaching, hopefully, millions of people. This is a neural network that's evolving. Now, we call it the internet, but, it's a neural network, a new connectome that is evolving. No one in the past, not Jesus, not Muhammad, not Rumi, not the Buddha, had this privilege of extending their little microphone into a global arena where, if what we're saying makes sense, and there is, in fact, the possibility of rewiring the entire planet's brain through what we call the internet. And even as we speak right now, the technologies that are evolving. And we can't take credit for the evolution of these technologies because the technologies themselves are part of the evolutionary impulse of the universe. Unfortunately, the technologies are both divine and diabolical. So when you have creativity and a divided mind, you get nuclear weapons. When you have creativity and the whole mind, you get a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, and joyful world. So this technology, I feel, as it extends into what we call the metaverse, into new things, even though they're going through turbulence, cryptocurrency, democratization of the privilege for freedom, the idea of shared values, the fact that technology will soon move into blockchain, decentralized voting systems, the ability to track everything to its source, the blockchain technology, the cryptocurrencies, the new metaverse that will evolve into immersive, intelligent ecosystems where we are actually immersed in the reality that we are projecting and expanding our perceptual activity beyond even normal human, normal perceptual activity is a very narrow band of electromagnetic activity that we translate into our perceptual experience that we call everyday reality. But, that is very species specific. I've now met people who can access the reality of other species, of plants, of insects, of other sentient beings. We are part of a matrix of intelligence that is so incomprehensible. No philosophy, no science will take us there. So I go back to traditions like the Buddha's tradition, because I'm part of that Eastern culture, but also go back to the Vedanta, which, has some amazing insights. The Yoga Vaishishta, a text from thousands of years ago, says, infinite universes come and go in the vast expanse of consciousness. They're like motes of dust dancing in a beam of light. And those infinite universes exist in consciousness alone. So in these wisdom traditions, they outline certain principles. And we don't have the luxury of time right now to go through all these principles. I just want to mention the first and the last, the bookends, okay? And this is from Vedanta and the yogic system. The first principle, which is the first yama, which means principle of social interaction. The first principle is ahimsa. Ahimsa means love and non-violence, not by what you say, not by what you do, but your presence of being. So that's the first, you are the embodiment of love and presence and peace in the same way as light from a bonfire or light from the sun. Focused on none, denied to none, but just radiating that presence of love. That's the first bookend. And the last bookend, and there are many in between that we don't have time to go to, the last is surrender to the divine, incomprehensible, irreducible, formless, infinite, wondrous mystery that we are. If we do that, and we understand that differentiation is not separation, that diversity is, in fact, the advantage to our collective creativity at the moment, then we have a solution.
Wow.
What you said,
yeah. Ervin, yes.
I think important element is to realize that it's not the question of understanding a consciousness that is held by the universe. That consciousness is not a subject-predicate attribute. It's not that there is the universe and then it has consciousness. That consciousness is the universe. That we are part of a conscious universe, a psychophysical universe. Not in a dualistic sense, but in an integrated sense. That incomprehensible whole about which Deepak is talking is an expression of consciousness. And that we human beings are capable of glimpsing some element of that, glimpsing at least that there is this consciousness in the world. and that it is higher than anything else around us, and that we are part of it, and we can be a conscious midwife of its development. That is surely not a usual factor, at least on this part of the universe, of this solar system. It's an unusual privilege, not by chance that we are here. We are here, I think, to be conscious elements of the consciousness, which is the universe, translating that consciousness into well-being, if we grasp it, if we recognize it right. For that, we need a new mindset. With that, we need the old mindset, what Deepak is talking about, rediscovered and re-embraced. Then we can together move forward and create the kind of world that we were meant to create, because this is not an indifferent universe, not a chance universe. It is here to move toward higher and higher levels of evolution, diversity, but also integration, choice among the many elements that make available ever more paths opening for us. And we are at a cusp, we are at a moment when recognition is dawning on us, and it's making us conscious architects, conscious agents, as Fred is talking about it as well, conscious agents of this evolutionary trend. So we are at a fascinating moment of human history. Nothing like this has happened. A conscious species recognizing the multiple paths that are becoming available to it. Facilitators, agents, you've got to be conscious agents, conscious facilitators. Then the great, undescribable, incomprehensible whole that Deepak is talking about will be translated in us through our intuition, not through our rational mind, but through our intuition, will be translated into action so that we can all physically live and thrive together on this planet.
Beautifully said. So let me ask you something, Fred, because Deepak was talking essentially about radiating a loving energy and surrender. He also had mentioned, among others, Rumi. And I want to ask you something, Fred, relating to our dark, if you will, our dark nature, which continually asserts itself throughout the ages. Yet we keep condemning and suppressing it, which just reinforces it as it festers and either explodes into war, violence, intolerance that we're seeing right now, or implodes as in disease. Rumi has a quote, and I'll tell you this: that which haunts us will always find a way out. The wound will not heal unless given witness. The shadow that follows us is the way in. So when birthing this new era of well-being, should we first, we're talking about grand and vital concepts, but we've got to also bring them down into a kind of bite-sized piece that various people around the world can digest. And there is so much fear right now. So when birthing this new era of well-being, should we first perhaps lily pad towards love by removing the stigma of disliking something or disagreeing with someone, and first learn to do that safely and respectfully? Is that a lily pad towards love, or is there no such thing? And then I'd like to hear Deepak's feelings. Fred is reflecting.
No, I'm trying to find a little arrow to open up my mute.
A real world issue. Okay.
Well, you know, we evolve in the direction of perceived challenge. You think about your life, isn't it true? And then why is it a challenge, right? So, you know, the meaning of the dualistic world, when there's light, there's shadow. It's always there, but there's no light, no shadow. It's our perception of light and shadow. So when we go at our shadow, we'll find the light, and vice versa. But, you know, there is no such thing, the dark side. It's just an appearance in a dualistic world. They always happens. There's light, there must be shadow. And so when we think, oh, this is our dark side, there's a perception. So earlier I heard a thing about nonviolent. It just clicked my mind. What is nonviolent communication? Don't be judgmental. And what is judgmental? The minute you have duality, you have like and dislike. So you take out the duality and judgment, now your perception is subject-object unity. And so first, if we say, okay, where am I going to find light? You're going to see the shadow, and you know where the light is casting. You know the sun is that direction, right? But that too is not real. It's still a dualistic thinking of looking at things. And in effect, would there be light if there's no darkness? And so it's true. But you think about today is very interesting, right? So we know we're in the information era. Now we are going to have digital information, DNA information, and all information. We truly move into information era. The funny thing about projection, we can actually see ourselves. We are a projection. We are a projection, a holographic reality. And this holographic reality with the conscious create another holographic reality or metaverse that we can experience reality before we create what we say, where we create the reality physically, which is also a holographic reality. Now, wouldn't it be easier? Now, I was just hearing about the future of metaverse that you can actually do digital twins that actually can have bioelectrical structure like yourself. You can actually subscribe a medicine and give it to your digital twin and see the result before you actually take the medicine in your body. So they're doing all kinds of things with metaverse. It's not a game thing only. So look at this. We project in this holographic reality to create another holographic reality so we can see the holographic reality. Now, isn't it easier to wake up to understand what holographic reality is, where we can jump in that one and experience and live there? So this is indeed a very interesting era for awakening. And everything indicated we're moving there, right? So I just finished a new book, which is on this topic about the vision, a new economy that the United Nations said, well, we need a new paradigm, a new economic paradigm of well-being and happiness. We need to have that to move from GDP to GHP. Now, GHP is not outside. GHP is inside. So after 10 happiness report is jogging on the same spot. You cannot find GHP outside. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fred. So let me, off the heels of that, let me pose this to all of you, whoever would like to respond. Suffering has been a hallmark of the human condition, and even spiritual awakening with dark nights of the soul that can make or break us. The feeling of vulnerability can cause us to erect walls of protection or remove barriers to the awareness of a loving presence. So, with the world in upheaval, homesteads being challenged by environmental collapse, jobs being replaced by AI, all the vulnerability that this implies, is creativity. And I think, Deepak, you were referring to this early on. Is creativity our new salvation, if you will, our new skill set for not only surviving, but inviting well-being? Is awakening via suffering becoming old paradigm, and awakening by finding one's creative passion, imagination, and self-expression new paradigm? Who would like to?
Short answer is yes, new paradigm. But creativity and love and surrender to the infinite all go together. Creativity without love is totally meaningless and dangerous and diabolical. So you need both of that. Now, while I was listening to Fred, here's what the thought came to me. Nothing that we attribute as a property of the physical world actually exists in the physical world. So if I ask you, where's the color red? There's no color red in the physical world, and even as I perceive this color red, it's colorless photons that appearing in my consciousness is the color red. So there's no color in the real world. A color only exists in consciousness. And without color, there's no shape. And without shape, there's no form. Similarly, there's no sound in the real world. There's no flavor in the real world. There's no scent in the real world. There's no image in the real world. There's no thought in the real world. There's no insight in the real world. Or what we call the real world, the physical world, the creative world. The whole thing is assembled non-locally, and yet we have this extraordinary experience that we are having a local experience. And that is a trick of the senses, as Fred said. And our sensory perception is always delivering magical lies. So, they're magical in that everything appears that it's true. The earth seems flat, but we know it's spinning at dizzying speeds, hurtling through space at thousands of miles an hour. And it's not flat. Things appear solid. We know they're proportionately as void as intergalactic space. So everything that you perceive, everything that you can think, everything that you can imagine, everything that you can conceptualize is a lie. And that includes, by the way, quantum particles. We say, oh, that's a Higgs boson. We gave a name to a space-time event in consciousness in a very complicated experiment that cost billions of dollars. We excluded every activity in the universe. We saw a blip in the Hadron Collider, and by the time we saw it, it didn't exist. And we say, oh, that's Higgs boson. It creates mass in the universe. It's as good as saying, that the whole universe came from this one particle that we have now observed, when by the time we observed it, it didn't even exist. The whole scientific paradigm, which is very useful for creating technology, but is now getting to the point where it says, there is no such thing as a world. There is no such thing as a universe. There's no such thing as even a body. There is only the infinite modifying itself into a multiplicity of infinite modes of knowing that are also not only species-specific, but culture-specific within human beings. So, there will never be an agreement on what is reality as we interpret it through our five senses, because we were all conditioned differently. So what we call light and shadow, up and down, pleasure and pain, all these things are created by us in order that we can know ourselves as that. I can know myself as that. What I call an object is an experience. Whether it's a book or my telephone, it's an experience. And as an experience, it's a modulation of perceptual activity interpreted by human beings as this iPhone. But actually, it's me in disguise. So when I see myself in an object, whether it's a coffee cup or a phone, that's beauty. When I see myself in another living being, that's love. And love and beauty are truth. And we have to go beyond our normal concepts, including the shadow self and all of this, to see in that wholeness of experience, everything is me in disguise. And that me is not a person. Even what I call the other is me in a different uniform. So, Meister Eckhart, the eye with which I see God is the same eye that God sees me with. Or even a simple injunction that nobody understands, love your enemy as yourself. Well, because your enemy is yourself in another variety, in another mutation, in another expression. For that, at some point, even our philosophies don't work. We have to just be still. As Ruby said, know that God's language is silence and everything else is poor translation. So, we have to settle into that being that transcends all differentiation. And suddenly there's glory. The glory is joy, truth, goodness, beauty, harmony, love, compassion, empathy, equanimity. and freedom from the constructs of birth and death, which are based on false identity. So you talked about suffering, and Fred will be an expert in the Four Noble Truths and the causes of suffering as outlined in Buddhism, but they're similar in Vedanta. They say the cause of 5 causes of suffering called the kleshas, not knowing who you really are, confusing yourself with your selfie, grasping and clinging at experience which can't be held on to because every experience is transient, ephemeral, ungraspable, recoiling from the same experiences, identifying with your ego, and fear of death. But in that true identity that we really are, these things disappear. They're like phantoms that we created as a result of confusing differentiation with separation.
I saw what looked like a divine light emanating from down up on your face. I'm sorry that we're not doing a video podcast instead of audio, but was that the real deal, Deepak, or was that the iPhone?
I think I was messing with the iPhone, trying to shut it off, but it wouldn't.
Well, look at that. It still looks like divine light, and I'm sure it is embedded in that as well.
Why not capture it on video anyway?
Indeed. I'd like to, Ervin, please, I want to turn it over to you, please.
These are ultimate questions, but let's not go into the other extremes of thinking that these questions can be resolved by simple yes or no answers. The closest we can get is by intuition, rationalized to the sense, in the sense of what can we understand. That we can understand anything at all is a tremendous mystery, is the greatest miracle of all, as Einstein said that. This universe has elements that is understandable, but it's not a physical universe, not a material universe. It's not a mental universe. It's a holographic oneness which self-evolves. I think that's the closest we can get to that. Something happened in our estimation 13.7 billion years ago. Something happened, a singularity, which created further events. Events that are moving one to another, becoming more and more complex, more and more interconnected. Chaos is being reduced and being replaced by coherence. More and more something is happening. But what that is happening is not in a physical universe, because that will be a misleading way of emphasizing, of placing that. What is happening is this psychophysical oneness, this total akashic paradigmatic field, this holographic oneness, which is there, which is the greatest mystery, as Deepak talks about it. But it is something which is there. It's not just imagination. Something is happening. To say that there is nothing there, if you're just imagining it all, is to go back into the fallacy of the objective idealist. Yes, there is, but it's not something separate. It's not something which you can say, there it is, and it has such and such properties. It is a holistic wholeness consciousness which evolves itself. The real question is, we becoming aware of this, we becoming conscious of it, can we use our consciousness to become coherent facilitators, midwives? So there's this remarkable event which we call Homo sapiens, this remarkable configuration of vibrations and frequencies that we can somehow glimpse. How could that survive? How could that continue to live, to exist, to thrive? This is the realization, not beyond body-mind dualism, beyond consciousness and the physical world. Going recognize that we are part of a self-evolving wholeness. That is perhaps, as far as I can see, as far as we can go. To become a good part, a constructive part, that is the mission of a conscious species. It's a mission to which we have to live up to. It's our task in this world.
Beautifully stated, Ervin. I think we're coming to the end of this program, and I just want to ask each of you if you have a final thought or comment that you'd like to make or question. Fred, I see you leaning in.
I like to go back the two comments our colleagues made. One is the final comment about oneness, coherency, and the other is Deepak saying that love, creativity, and surrender is not separable. It's the same thing. So when you're whole, it's not separable. Only thing is you commit what the Chinese yellow emperor canon say, all our sickness is because we're ignorant. If they were just like a Socrates who says, know thyself. The only thing I know is I know nothing. So in Chinese cultures, if you have that, at least you will be careful and not to get sick. But this wholeness is love. Love is, when you're not separate, how can not be love? But it's not the love you see in Hollywood. And creativity doesn't come from you. It comes from the source. It comes from the cosmos. So if you don't surrender your calling by them and insist to use your ignorant desire to drive things, none of them exist. And that is a coherency, well-being, oneness that Ervin was talking about. I mean, it touches me that these comes together as little as language can explain. I think we have an energetic dialogue today here of understanding each other.
Absolutely. Beautiful. Fred, thank you. Deepak, any final thoughts?
And just to reinforce what Fred said with a quote from Rumi, he said, exchange your cleverness for bewilderment. And I think bewilderment is a holy experience. And when we have that holy experience, we are holy ourselves, we are whole, and we are healed. And what creativity is a new story, a new context, a new meaning, new relationship, is really a death and a resurrection. So we need that death of the old story, and we need the virgin birth of the new story.
Oh, here's to that. Ervin, final thoughts.
I think we have said most of it. I think we're dealing with a great mystery in which we participate. It's not outside of us, it's in us. If we want to give up to our mission of conscious beings, we have to wake up to know that the answer is in us, and that the problems of this world have arisen because we have ignored them. We have just started to do everything we could for short-term benefits. Now it's time to get back, to recognize that we are children of the universe. We are part of that wholeness that Deepak is talking about, that Fred is talking about, and do our best to be a constructive part. So as indestructible, indefinable events in this universe, we could continue to exist in this universe, to persist and to have other indescribable elements to persist with us.
Oh, thank you all. I have to say that recently the G7 convened here in town. And I feel that today we've had a convening of the G3. This is leadership with love. And I want people who are listening around the world, whatever culture, whatever demographic, whatever position you're in, whatever job situation, leaders of nations or corporations, or those just leading their lives with love. This is important stuff today. This is the stuff of enchantment. And I want to thank you, Deepak. I want to thank you, Ervin. And I want to thank you, Fred, for this really riveting discussion today. It's going to reverberate far and wide. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in around the world. I wish we had more time, maybe a sequel. Hey. And I want to thank also our wonderful production team led by Nora Cesar, Kenichi Sugihara, Fabrizio Beria, and those many wonderful others at ITEA Institute. I'm Alison Goldwyn, inviting you to join us for more podcast episodes and to gift a copy of Dawn of an Era of Well-Being book to yourself or a loved one. It's a wonderful companion during challenging times. From whatever nation state or emotional state you might be in, Dawn of an Era of Well-Being is the place to tune in. The bravado of our ego has historically gotten the better of us. So remember, when building that new paradigm for humankind, let's include human kindness. Stay tuned and stay attuned. Thank you for joining us. Dawn of an Era of Well-Being is a co-production of the Laszlo Institute, ITEA Institute, and Select Books. It's produced by Nora Cesar and Kenichi Sugihara, with theme music Chimera by Biba DuPont. The book, Dawn of an Era of Well-Being, co-authored by Ervin Laszlo and Frederick Tsao, is available wherever books or ebooks are sold. Please subscribe to Dawn of an Era of Well-Being, the podcast, on Apple or Spotify for more fascinating guests and discussion. My name is Alison Goldwyn, founder and creative director of Synchronistery.com, a future party for the planet broadcast live worldwide. Wishing you well-being till we talk again next week.